What's up, everybody? Welcome
Did you
back
just do a
to
sound effect with your
another
hand?
episode of
Did you
Let Me
just
Finish. Let me finish. Today, we're going to talk about should the NBA mess with the regular season structure, length, start and end time, and stuff like that. So, we're going to give a few of the ideas that have been proposed by people, and we're going to give a couple of ideas that we propose that we think could benefit the NBA regular season to make it more profitable and more fun to watch for fans, and also more um, helpful to players to keep them inspired, to keep them healthy and recharged, and things like that. So, we're going to start with should the NBA shift their season start date to Christmas Day rather than October? So, Alex, what do you think?
so I think yes. I think it's going to be really interesting with the COVID-19 stuff. If they come back and they still play the playoffs this year, assuming that they're obviously the playoffs are not going to start on time, um, then you're probably also not going to start next season on time, and it gives you kind of this free-ish opportunity to just see what the
To
reaction
test it.
would be if you started basketball on Christmas Day, and um, I think that's a good thing. That's I think when most of us start really paying attention to the NBA, right, is
Definitely.
Christmas Day. It's kind of the unofficial start of the season as it is. It
Right.
also moves more of your season outside of football season, which
Right.
nothing beats in this country. Like football,
Nothing.
football is king, and it's king by a mile.
Football owns Monday, Thursday, and Sunday,
Sunday,
and
correct?
Saturday while college is playing.
College football, correct?
Yeah. So,
And while I think the NBA could maybe compete on a national, not a local level, with college football, because it's like college football is very regional. So once
right.
people are done watching their team, they don't. It's not as. But regardless of which, yeah, I think they should. I think they should look to do that. I think that moves again. It shifts everything back a couple months. So you also that means you kind of end the season at the beginning of uh like
Preseason.
football training camp,
Yeah.
preseason time, where we're just kind of ramping up for football. But if you're telling me it's like, all right, training camp in the NFL or NBA finals, like you're probably talk shows and other things like that are probably going to
Right.
lean towards NBA finals.
Right.
Um,
It helps a lot with talk shows too. There's not that gigantic gap between basketball and football when nobody really wants to talk about baseball, but they kind of have to.
right, exactly. And that's like, that is prime kind of real estate for
Right.
the NBA to dominate the discussion
Right.
and eyeballs of everybody on a
Yeah,
national
because
scale.
yeah, once football is over, you can play basketball all 7 days of the week if you wanted to.
Right, if you scheduled it like that.
Right.
Uh,
So, moving on from just shifting this season, another one that has been proposed is potentially shortening the amount of games or having in season bracket style tournaments. What do you think about either of those options?
so the shortening of games, I think, is the one thing above. Like, if you were just going to make one decision that would help the viewership and eyeballs essentially on the NBA, the single most impactful move you could do, I think, is shortening the season, is going from 82 games to 60 or 50. Um, and one of the reasons for that is just simply it makes every game more important, and
Mhm.
and if you have that sense of urgency, that gets people to a TV set more
Right.
than really and truly anything else. Like, part of the reason we love college football is every game matters. Part of the reason we love all 16 of these games
Right.
matter and all of that. And even when the NFL is going to go to 17 games, like, still all 17 of these games will matter. And so baseball and basketball and hockey probably, honestly, too. Although hockey's biggest issue is that it's a Canadian sport, not an American one, at least in this country.
Right.
It's obviously super, super popular north of the border. But both of them could do from shortening their seasons. Now, they won't because that means the owners and the teams will miss out on concessions and sales. Less games means less home
Sales.
games, all of those
Right.
things. So I don't see a scenario where
Right.
we
It'll
take off.
be it will be less gross viewership, participation, but more net participation, and so right.
Particularly from a TV standpoint. I
Right.
think
So more
you're going to get
people will watch more percentage of the games, but there will be less overall viewership likely because the sheer amount of games won't be there anymore. So
correct. And
my big issue before you go on with or my only real issue with shortening the amount of games is I have a huge inclination to the integrity of statistics and history in sports. And
right,
when you mess with the amount of games played in a season for a sport, it it kind of screws with it, puts a fork in the road for
right,
history when you're
right.
talking about sports. And so that's my only thing is if you dropped it to 60 games, now you have teams and a really good season is 40 wins. And so like it's really tough to
Right. You're
even
not
if
gonna. You can't
right,
have right like your 72 and 10, 70 win teams are
right,
disappear from stuff like that. No, numbers wise, statistically, like we've gone through, particularly like in the NBA, like there's been a 3-point era and a non 3-point era, and now you have guys that right like we're shooting way more threes, and
right,
so we've, I think, will be able to, if not maybe in the moment, but certainly eventually readjust our eyes
right,
to statistics and things like that. Like even with like quarterbacks in the NFL, like we know I just because you put up 4,000 yards in a season doesn't mean that you're automatically, top flight. Like, you know what I mean? Like Joe Montana, I think has like one or maybe no seasons of 4,000 yards, but obviously we can readjust for the era in which he played.
right,
We were just talking before this video about John Elway, right? Like his quarterback rating for his career is like 80, which is well below like the league average today. But as we said, as I was telling you before, like he never played
right,
in a league where the league average was 80. Like
right. He
so
was
80 for
always
his
far
time.
and away above average
Right,
in
exactly.
his era. So it
Within
would
it.
take some adjusting. I'm just a purist in that category. So that's the only
No,
thing I
I,
have
I I I understand that. I don't like. I'm not a huge fan of like the 17th game in the NFL, even if like I know I'll enjoy watching it.
to me. So
Yeah, the
at
NFL,
least pick a
NFL's
round
doing
number of NFL. Come on.
well. In the NFL, wasn't the NFL was so like, and this is probably just really weird for me, so mathematically satisfying. Like 32 teams, perfectly divided into 8 divisions, like 2 conferences, like
16 games.
16 games. Like
Bro, y'all
you had
screwed it
two
up.
teams get
Do
a
something
bye, so
else.
you had
There
exactly
was a
3 rounds.
better way to
Oh,
do this. It was a better way than so moving on from shortening the season from 82 games to potentially 60 or 50 games. What do you think of the in-season tournaments?
oh man, they strike me as really really gimmicky. And I think shortening or shifting the season, even if you keep the games, is a better way to do it. Um, the biggest thing with the NBA is load management has been around for a really long time, and by really long time I mean Duncan and the Spurs.
Right.
Um, what
We're talking
Kawhi
20 plus years.
what Kawhi Leonard is doing is not load management. Like he's literally just taking one out of every 4 games off. He's also the only one doing it. I think the NBA has a huge like perception issue
Right.
with people being like, oh man, these stars they just they don't even show up to play anymore. And it's like, okay, no, like they
It's
play. Like
just
LeBron's missed what 3 games this year. Like yes, the days of everyone playing 80 or 82 games are done. But all of these guys are gonna miss like maybe 1 game a month. You're talking 7 games on the season, non-injury related. And when they miss injury related, I feel like they do a pretty good job of kind of not taking the other rest days off. You know what I mean?
Right, because they're recovering faster, so they're kind of making up for the time and then using the time that they would have in the 80s and taking it for rest rather than because their medicine or their rehab wasn't as good.
Right. So
So
I would so
it's just
it's Kawhi is the only one that's legitimately like that you have a real legit possibility that if you are a fan that bought a ticket to a Clipper game and you're like I wanted to watch Kawhi and then it's just like oh Kawhi's not playing tonight because Kawhi decided not to play tonight or Kawhi is actually the most injured slash injury risk largest injury risk of any superstar in modern NBA history. Like it's one of
he's
those two
not.
things.
That's Joel Embiid or Gordon
That's
Hayward.
fair. Oh well, okay. Let's not elevate Gordon Hayward to superstar status by that.
Okay, so
Oh,
I think that the in season tournaments are stupid. I'm just gonna say that straight up. There's no sport where the regular season has these random tournaments in the middle unless you're talking about soccer and the Olympics. That's the only that's the only sport that has this sort of um,
yeah,
this sort of
and soccer doesn't.
what's
And
it
one of the
called?
like the important I don't remember, but soccer, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't decide. At least in Europe, doesn't actually decide their champion by just like a playoff series or a playoff game. Like they do it based on the entire season, like it's a point thing.
Right.
So it works
So
very differently there.
I think that's the last thing that you do. And I don't even know if it is the last thing that you do if you're the NBA. I think you just don't even do it. I don't think there's any reason why you should do that. There's
That would be
Okay, so another point that we're going to bring up about changing the regular season is standardizing the schedule to make it um, to make them play certain days every week. And
yeah.
so, like we
Just
said
like
earlier, after football, you can play all 7 days. So this doesn't apply to after football necessarily, but just like you were about to say, the football plays Sunday, Monday, Thursday. They play those 3 days every single week. You know exactly when they're going to come on. With basketball, it's like, okay, I got to go look up when the next TNT game is going to come on unless you have NBA League Pass and then, then they just pop up all the time. But if you knew every Wednesday you were going to get a doubleheader primetime game, then more people would tune in expecting something good to happen. Does
yeah,
that make
and even more than just that, like you don't have to in the NFL know who your team is playing that week. Like you know they're either going to be playing on a Monday or a Thursday, in which case they're the only game, or like you can just like, it's Fox and CBS 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 7 o'clock.
right?
And so like even if it's like so TNT, I think it's like every Wednesday and like they have national games on Wednesdays and Tuesdays and I think Fridays. But regardless of whether those are if you knew TNT and ESPN, those are the only two channels that have games going on, and you're like, all right, we're either going to be playing at the my team, whatever team that is. I'm a Spur fan, so the Spurs they're either going to be playing on on a Sunday, a Tuesday, or a Thursday, and there's two game slots and it's ESPN and TNT. I think that kind of regulation really helps because otherwise it's like, all right, well, if you're not the national game this week, then my team might be playing on any number of days, and I have no clue. I
Right.
gotta. I think it's easier
Right.
to figure out
Right. And
for
you
the
could
for
make
the casual fan. We should
right.
also point out, like, yes, I get it.
Right.
Like, I get updates when the Spurs play every day, every game. So it's
Right.
not. But for the casual fans to view in and to up your viewership of those, I think it's easier if they know, Sunday nights or Tuesday nights, that's basketball night. Like.
Right. Right. I think if they did something like that, personally, I think a Wednesday, Friday, Saturday schedule for national games, I think that would be a really great schedule for them because they could keep that all year. College football kind of ends midday ish. until
true.
you get in. Right. So if you had a national basketball game Saturday night, then you're not being infringed on by college football. And so if you just knew TNT Wednesday, Friday, Saturday at 7 p.m., boom,
There's a
there you
national,
go.
right?
You can go watch the national game, and then your team plays, like you said, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, if it's not a national game. And so they could figure that out. There are computers that do stuff like that. And then it would be a lot easier, especially to find when your team is playing. And it would make it a lot more accessible for the regional viewers, like you said, because most people watch basketball for the stars, but when you focus too much on that, you're leaving out the people who are diehard team fans, like, I don't know, Spike Lee with the Knicks. They've been
Right.
bad forever, but he still goes to every game. So,
Yeah, and I think they could I think they could grow like the thing that baseball struggles with is marketing its stars. That's why it's really popular regionally, but not super discussed on national television because baseball fans, all of the producers and people that decide what these show topics are, have figured out that baseball fans really care about their baseball team, but they don't really care about every other. They don't have an opinion on other teams.
right.
Basketball's kind of the opposite of that. Like people don't necessarily care about their teams as much. They care a lot though about that. Everybody's got an opinion on James Harden. Everybody's got an opinion on LeBron James. Like these are polarizing figures. But I think you could still I think San Antonio really cares about their
Right.
their basketball team. I think there is still that to tap into because the NFL does that, right? Like the NFL is regional and national all at the same time. And part of that's because it's football and it's just awesome. But I think the NBA could do that to a certain extent. And so if you did have a national game, but also at, like the NFL does at the 1 o'clock spot, like it's got a bunch of regional games, right? Everybody's getting, and then the 3 o'clock, it has like a national game, but then a couple other regional games, and then it has a primetime slot. Like I think in basketball, you could do that. You could do regional games and then a few regional games, but a primetime spot on, on your Wednesday, your Fridays, and your Saturdays. So
yeah, so standardizing / structuring your schedule better. And just to kind of recap what we've gone over, what we think could help is standardizing the schedule, moving to Christmas as your tip-off for the season, and then shortening the amount of games played. All of those combined, I think, would promote higher net viewership, percentage-wise viewership. It would promote each game being more weighted, and I think it could be better for the NBA as a whole. Anyway, so the very last thing I want to talk about before we go is it has to do with the regional viewership. In football, your division really matters, right? And sometimes to a fault, but it really matters, and that's why it can be regional and national, because who your rival is, and that you just hate your rival, right? If you're a Cowboys fan, you hate the
Eagles and the Giants, and
right.
Yeah. The other thing, so here's the thing: the reason divisions can be to a fault in in football, is because they like reward you double for winning your division, right? Like they give you a playoff spot, but then they also like ensure that it's a top 4 seed, so you get a home playoff game.
Right.
If they just said you win your division, you're into the playoffs, but it's not necessarily means that you automatically get a top 4 seed, then I don't think that's necessarily an issue. And the other thing is, like, one of the benefits of keeping divisions is like it lets people stay in the playoff race. Like the Giants sucked all year, right? But they weren't technically eliminated from the playoffs until like past,
Right.
I
So
think,
it keeps you
12 or
in the
something.
run.
So
It
it
keeps
keeps you
you
in the
in the
run.
race.
So more fans are like, oh, you know what? You know,
Right.
if we get a few breaks, like we could still win this thing, like,
Right.
you know, and so there are benefits, yeah, absolutely, to like
Yeah.
keeping the
So
competitive.
I think if they did make divisions in the NBA more of a focus, not too much because the stars obviously run the league, but a little bit more to kind of boost your regional attention, I think that could
Right.
help a lot.
So that would be interesting. So I don't the divisions in the NBA. I think actually technically do matter, sort of, kind of, eventually, because I remember a few years back now,
Nobody
the
knows.
Spurs. Yeah, I know, and that is kind of the other thing. I think they should actually do the opposite. Is they should actually just say, nah, divisions really don't matter at all. Like it's just conferences, or it's just the whole league, in the league
Okay,
where you
so
play
just pick
everybody.
one. Just pick one. We can agree on that. Just either pick this side or this side. Stop standing on this like weirdo. Am I gonna go this way? Or am I gonna go this way? What am I gonna do? NBA, just pick one. Either do away with the divisions, like Alex said, or focus more on them and make
Or
people
actually
care
make
about
them
them.
matter.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
actually make winning your division worth something.
yep. So there you go. That's our thoughts on what they should do with the NBA regular season. If you liked what we had to say, like the video. If you didn't like what we had to say, just click off the video. If you want to talk about it,
You
then
didn't
let's
like
talk
what
about
we
it.
said. I'm surprised you made it to the end of the video, honestly.
Uh,
You should congratulate yourself for being able to stand and watch something.
Self care, self love. All
Uh,
right. We'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.